There are rows and rows, floor to ceiling, of Jackson's possessions. This warehouse is 20,000 square feet. Every inch of it is full. There are antiques and video games from Neverland Ranch.
Michael Jackson's garage sounds like the least mysterious part of Neverland, until you realize what those vehicles were really doing. The Rolls-Royces, limousines, vans, and custom interiors were not random trophies from a rich superstar. They were private rooms, escape routes, and moving walls between Michael and a world that could not stop reaching for him. What they found inside was less about cars than the life he was trying to survive. Neverland, after Michael. For years, Neverland was one of the most famous private homes in the world, but calling it a home almost makes it sound too normal. It was a ranch, a fantasy park, a retreat, a stage set, and a shelter all at once. There were rides, a train, a theater, animals, gardens, statues, gates, and enough carefully designed details to make the property feel like Michael had taken the inside of his imagination and built walls around it. To the public, Neverland looked like proof of wealth and eccentricity. To Michael, it seems to have been something more complicated. It was a place where he could control the atmosphere. Outside the gates, he was the most famous performer on Earth. Inside, he could build a world where the rules were different, where playfulness, privacy, childhood, performance, and protection were all mixed together. That is why the garage matters. At first, it sounds like a smaller, less emotional part of the story. Neverland had the rides and the legend, while the garage had vehicles. But once you look closer, the cars begin to feel like the smaller version of the ranch itself. They were not only ways to move from one location to another, they were controlled environments, built for a man whose ordinary movement had become nearly impossible. After Michael left Neverland, the property slowly changed. The fantasy that had once seemed alive began to fade into silence, and after his death, every object connected to him became more valuable, more symbolic, and more open to interpretation. In 2009, more than 1,000 items from his private world were prepared for auction before the sale was cancelled and the exhibition continued. That moment gave the public an unusual glimpse into the things Michael had lived with: costumes, furniture, artwork, arcade games, vehicles, and pieces of a private life that had always been surrounded by mystery. The point is not that every viral story about the garage should be accepted at face value. The real value comes from looking at the documented objects together and asking what kind of life would need them. The answer is not simply a rich life or a strange life. It was a life where comfort had to be engineered, privacy had to be built, and even travel had to be turned into a protected experience. The cars were a private architecture. Michael Jackson's vehicles can easily be mistaken for celebrity trophies. A Rolls-Royce, a limousine, custom interiors, gold detailing, entertainment systems, and rare machines all fit the image people already have of him. He was the king of pop, so of course, he would own cars that looked expensive. That is the easy reading, and it is also the least interesting one. The better way to understand the garage is to treat it like architecture. Every vehicle created a space around Michael. Some spaces made him look royal. Some helped him disappear. Some gave him privacy. Some turned travel into comfort. Together, they show how fame had changed the basic design of his life. Most people use a car to go somewhere. Michael needed vehicles that could also protect him from what happened when he arrived. By the height of his fame, a simple public appearance could become a security problem. A hotel entrance could turn into a mob scene. A drive through a city could attract photographers, fans, and people trying to catch even a few seconds of access. He was not only traveling through roads, he was traveling through attention. That changes the meaning of the cars completely. A luxury vehicle was not only a symbol that Michael had made it, it was a barrier between his body and the world. Tinted windows, soft interiors, wide seats, entertainment systems, controlled access, and enclosed cabins all served the same emotional purpose. They gave him a way to move without being fully exposed. There is a lonely irony in that. Michael built his career on movement, the moonwalk, the spins, the stage entrances, the videos, the tours, the choreography. His public image was all motion and spectacle. Yet, the garage suggests a different kind of movement, one defined by caution. He could move millions of people with a performance, but moving himself through the world became harder every year. That is what makes the vehicles revealing. They show the distance between the performer the world watched and the man who needed walls around him, even when he was only going from one place to another. The Rolls-Royce showed the fantasy. The customized Rolls-Royce Silver Seraph limousine is the kind of vehicle people expect in a Michael Jackson collection. It had the luxury, the drama, the expensive materials, and the gold-trimmed image that matched the public idea of a superstar. On the surface, it looks like pure excess, the kind of object people point to when they want to prove how far removed a celebrity has become from normal life. But Michael's luxury often had a theatrical quality. He did not only buy beautiful things, he turned them into environments. A stage became a world. A music video became a short film. A ranch became Neverland. In that same pattern, the Rolls-Royce was not simply transportation. It was a moving private chamber designed to feel separate from ordinary life. That difference matters. The car was expensive, but its emotional meaning was not limited to price. Inside a vehicle like that, Michael could travel through public roads while surrounded by softness, polish, and control. The outside world might be crowded, loud, and unpredictable, but inside the limousine, everything could be arranged. The temperature, the seats, the windows, the mood, and the people allowed near him could all be controlled in a way that public life no longer allowed. For most celebrities, a limousine announces arrival. For Michael, it may also have created removal. It gave him distance before the crowd could reach him. It allowed him to be seen without being touched, watched without being fully available, and transported without having to step directly into the chaos until the door opened. That is the sadness hidden inside the glamour. The gold trim was easy to notice, but the real story was the separation. The more famous Michael became, the more ordinary space seemed to disappear around him. A restaurant, a sidewalk, an airport, a hotel lobby, a shop, a simple drive, all of it could become a public event. So the car had to become something more than a car. It had to become a room where the world could be kept on the other side of the glass. The van was the most honest vehicle. The most revealing vehicle in Michael's collection may not have been the flashiest one. It was the 1993 Ford Econoline van because it carried the strangest contrast in the entire garage. From the outside, it looked ordinary enough to blend in. It did not have the obvious royal presence of a Rolls-Royce. It did not announce Michael Jackson before the door opened. It looked like a van that could belong to a crew, a business, a family, or someone with no interest in being noticed. Inside, the story changed. The van was customized with leather seating, individual television screens, and a video game console. That turns the vehicle into something much more personal than a standard celebrity purchase. It was not only for appearance, it was for comfort, distraction, privacy, and time spent hidden between public moments. The outside of the van gave Michael anonymity. The inside gave him control. That combination may explain him better than almost anything in the collection. A Rolls-Royce says, "Look at who is inside." The Econoline says, "Do not look here at all." For a man whose face was one of the most recognizable in the world, that kind of ordinary disguise may have been more valuable than any luxury badge. It allowed him to carry a private room into public space while giving the outside world fewer reasons to stare. There is something deeply human in that choice. Michael Jackson had fame and money, yet this vehicle was valuable because it looked ordinary. Perhaps he sometimes wanted to feel smaller, quieter, harder to identify, and briefly free from being Michael Jackson. The van also changes how we understand his relationship with comfort. It was not comfort in the ordinary sense of someone enjoying a nice interior. It was comfort as a survival tool. A screen could distract him. A private seat could let him rest. A closed door could make the outside world manageable. The vehicle became a pause button in a life that rarely stopped moving. That is why the van says more than the Rolls-Royce. The Rolls-Royce shows the myth. The van shows the man trying to get away from it. The garage was a smaller Neverland. Once the vehicles are placed side by side, the garage starts to look like a miniature version of Neverland. The ranch was the largest expression of Michael's need to build private worlds, but the cars show that the same instinct followed him everywhere. He did not only create fantasy in one location, he kept finding ways to carry it with him. Neverland gave him gates, roads, rides, a theater, animals, music, and controlled space. The vehicles offered smaller versions of that same control. A limousine could become a sealed lounge. A van could become a hidden room. A luxury car could become a moving palace. Each one answered a different version of the same question. How does someone this famous move through the world without being swallowed by it? That question is the emotional center of the garage story. Michael had the kind of fame most artists dream about until they imagine what it actually means. Fame on his level did not simply bring applause. It changed the way strangers behaved around him. It made privacy rare, silence difficult, and normal life almost impossible to enter without planning. The vehicles reveal that contradiction better than any speech could. They are beautiful objects, but they are also defensive objects. They show taste, wealth, imagination, and control, but they also suggest fear, exhaustion, and the need for distance. They are exciting to look at, then sad once you understand why someone might need them. That is why the garage is more revealing than a standard celebrity collection. It does not only say Michael liked cars, it says he needed protected spaces everywhere he went. The outside world knew him as a performer who could make a stadium scream. The garage shows a man trying to travel quietly inside metal shells built to keep the screaming away. The unfinished worlds he never built. The vehicles also connect to a larger pattern in Michael's life. He was constantly turning imagination into physical space. Music was only the most famous version of that instinct. His videos had cinematic ambition. His concerts were theatrical. His clothes were designed as visual signatures. Neverland turned a ranch into a fantasy environment. Even his cars were customized until they felt less like machines and more like personal rooms. That world-building instinct did not stop with what he completed. In the 1990s, Michael was connected to plans for a larger Peter Pan-themed Neverland concept, with fantasy areas inspired by places like London, pirate worlds, and Neverland-style attractions. The project was never built, which makes it interesting in a different way. Finished work shows what an artist was able to complete. Unfinished plans show what he was still reaching toward before reality, money, time, controversy, or pressure got in the way. The unfinished concepts make the garage feel less random. Michael did not think in isolated objects. He thought in atmospheres. A property was not just land. A song was not just audio. A video was not just promotion. A vehicle was not just transport. Everything around him could become part of a larger mood. That is one reason people remain fascinated by the things he left behind. The objects feel like clues to a mind that never stopped designing escape. Even when an idea was impractical or never completed, it showed the same impulse: to build a world where the harshness of real life could be softened, stylized, or kept at a distance. There is creativity in that, but also sadness. The scale of the imagination suggests how badly Michael needed alternatives to ordinary reality. Neverland was not only a playground, it was a retreat from a life that had become too public. The vehicles were not only collectibles, they were portable rooms for someone who could not always safely occupy public space. The more you look at the unfinished worlds, the clearer the pattern becomes. Michael was not just collecting fantasy because he was rich enough to afford it. He was building fantasy because reality had become difficult to survive without it. When Neverland came back as a set. Years after Michael's death, Neverland returned to public attention when parts of the ranch were restored for the Michael Jackson biopic. That image is haunting for a reason. A place originally built as Michael's private escape was being reconstructed so the world could tell his story back to itself. There is something strange about that reversal. Neverland was once designed to keep the outside world at a distance. Later, the same property became part of the machinery that preserves and recreates the legend. The rides, tents, roads, and visual details that once belonged to Michael's controlled private world became pieces of a public production. That is what happens when a person becomes bigger than life. Even the spaces they built for privacy become public evidence after they are gone. A car becomes a museum object. A van becomes a detail fans study. A cancelled auction becomes a historical moment. A ranch becomes a filming location. The things that once protected Michael eventually became part of the story people use to understand him. This is why the garage still fascinates people. It sits at the intersection of private life and public legend. When Michael used these vehicles, they were functional. They moved him, hid him, entertained him, protected him, or helped him rest. After his death, they became symbols. People look at them now and try to read him through the seats, the glass, the trim, the screens, the doors, and the strange mix of extravagance and isolation. Every object connected to Michael now has two lives. The first life is what it meant when he used it. The second is what it means when the world studies it without him there to explain it. The garage is powerful because those two lives do not always match. What looked like luxury then can look like loneliness now. What looked like fantasy then can look like defense now. What looked like excess then can look like a man trying to create breathing room inside a life that never fully belonged to him. What they really found. So what did they really find when they opened Michael Jackson's garage? They found more than expensive vehicles. They found a pattern that ran through his entire private world. The Rolls-Royce showed the grand version of Michael's imagination. Theatrical, polished, royal, and designed down to the smallest detail. The limousines showed how travel could become separation, turning a simple journey into a sealed experience. The Ford Econoline van showed something more intimate, because its power came from the opposite of glamour. It could hide in plain sight while giving him comfort inside. The unfinished Neverland ideas showed that Michael's imagination was still building worlds even when the public only saw the finished spectacle. Together, those pieces reveal a man who was not simply showing off. He was creating layers around himself. Some layers were beautiful, some were playful, some were extravagant, others were quiet and defensive. But they all point back to the same problem. Michael Jackson's fame had grown so large that ordinary freedom had to be designed for him. For a normal person, transportation is just part of daily life. For Michael, it became a controlled passage through attention. He needed doors, tinted windows, security, interiors, hidden spaces, and vehicles that could either announce him safely or hide him completely. The garage was full of machines, but the machines were also answers. How do you move through a world that will not stop looking for you? How do you rest when even stillness becomes a spectacle? How do you stay human when the public keeps turning you into a symbol? That is the real revelation. The garage was not stunning because of the price tags. It was stunning because of the pattern. Every major object seemed to point toward control, privacy, escape, and imagination. These were not random trophies collected by a rich celebrity. They were pieces of a survival system built by a man who could no longer enter ordinary life without protection. That does not explain everything about Michael Jackson, and it should not be forced to. A garage cannot summarize a whole person, but it can reveal what that person needed around him. In Michael's case, what he needed was space inside the fame, silence inside the noise, and a way to move through the world without being completely consumed by it. For most people, a garage holds transportation. For Michael Jackson, It held evidence of a life where transportation had to become sanctuary. Michael Jackson's garage was not shocking because it held expensive cars. It was revealing because those cars showed how fame had changed the way he moved, rested, and protected himself. The Rolls-Royce showed fantasy, the van showed escape, and Neverland showed the biggest truth of all. Michael kept building private worlds because public life had become impossible. Comment which detail revealed him most: the cars, the van, or Neverland itself.